Maimonides takes this in a very different direction, in part because he grows up in a different kind of Islamic world.
Okay.
Maimonides grew up in Spain, in a portion of Spain that was ruled by the Almohads. The word literally means al-muwahidun, those who unify God's name.
Like
the Almohads insisted that there is only one God, that it is logically demonstrable that there's only one God, and therefore they required everybody in their rule to affirm the one God, namely the Muslim God, Allah. And in fact, there's some circumstantial evidence that Maimonides himself nominally became a Muslim for some period of time, because that's what the government required. And we know that he wrote, look, if the government's going to require you to make some confession that declares that God is one, go ahead and do it. There's nothing non-Jewish about what they're saying about God. And when Maimonides turns in the Mishnah Torah to the question of Yenesech, he says, look, Muslims are resident aliens. They are monotheists. Unlike the Gaonim, who say they're idolaters, they don't offer wine libations. He says they're not idolaters at all. And if they're not idolaters at all, then their wine can't be prohibited for benefit. We still can't drink it. Right? He's increasingly worried about the possibility of social interactions between Jews and Muslims. But Yenesech doesn't apply to Muslims. As far as Maimonides is concerned, it absolutely applies to Christians, because Trinitarian theology is polytheism, as far as Maimonides is concerned, as far as the Almohads are concerned.
It's a non-unification of the name.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, of course, Christians would give you a different argument for it. That's
right.
A different story. But what Maimonides is doing that the Gaonim didn't is dividing up those non-Jews on the basis of theology rather than the basis of ritual practice. And he's saying that Muslims are superior to other non-Jews. In fact, they're almost like us to the extent that they worship God alone. And this symbolic relaxation of the rules about Yenesech for Muslims is a way to exemplify that distinction that for Maimonides really mattered, because he's a theologian. He cares about these ideas deeply. And many much more practically minded readers, and especially readers in the Christian world, saw his text in a totally different way.
Well, also Maimonides tends to be very thought-oriented, like distinctly thought-oriented.
Absolutely. The very fact that the Mishnah Torah begins with, here are the things you need to believe. Professor Sarah Strumsa has made the case that Maimonides is an Almohad Jew. He's totally internalized the culture he grew up in, where you have to accept certain doctrinal statements. You know, the very notion of these 13 things that Jews must believe to be good Jews, that doesn't exist in rabbinic literature. Right. The rabbinic texts he's drawing on say, you can't do X, you can't do Y. Maimonides says, you must believe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 13. He's living in a different world, and he's internalizing aspects of that world to express what it means to be Jewish. And as a result, his version of Jewishness is different from that of Jews who lived in different times and places.
Wow. Okay, so he's very belief-driven, right? Very belief-driven, and that affects the way he perceives Muslims, since they're unifiers of the name. They believe in one God. There's no way they could even think about sacrificing to another God, or more pertinent to our considerations, libations, let alone, and working off the Gaonic piece about they don't even drink wine. How could they much less incorporate that into their offerings to God? So they don't even, but you could still benefit from their wine even if you can't drink it.
Correct. Although I will say that Maimonides carefully misreads the Gaonim. He wants you to think, when you read the Mishnah Torah, that he's not doing anything new. He wants you to think that what he's saying is in the Gemara, because the Gemara talks about resident aliens, and was affirmed by the Gaonim. Even though the Gaonim didn't refer to resident aliens, the Gaonim referred to newborns. The newborn piece doesn't appear in Maimonides because for Maimonides, it's not that the Muslims are ignorant. It's not that they're uneducated. They are intentionally monotheistic. So he spins it differently, but he keeps on grounding it in those sources so that if you don't look really carefully, you miss what he's doing.